So from Dunleary, Rathdown, we're going to move. Padraig Boland is going to take us to the Midlands. And Padraig is FET Skills Manager with Laois and Offaly Education and Training Board, and a member of the Midland Regional Transition Team, where he chairs the Working Group for Employment Continuity Pathways. So he's a background in community development and youth work, and as such led Laois and Offaly Education and Training Board's response to the skills need of Bord na Móna employees facing redundancy following the company's brown to green transition. So Padraig is going to talk about the just transition mechanism, making sure nobody is left behind. So over to you.
Thanks a million. Thank you very much, Emer. I had to check there for a minute. I wasn't sure that was myself you were talking about, but in fairness. Yeah, I'm the skills manager with Laois Offaly ETB. And I might as well be honest with you, I'm here today because Kieran Mulvey couldn't make it. And I'm sorry to disappoint. I don't have much to add to the science. I actually have nothing to add to the science. But I have a personal experience of just transition. And it's personal because my former colleague from Bord na Móna reminded me at lunchtime, I worked with Bord na Móna. I was the first manager of Lochborough Parklands in an earlier life. And I'm connected in many ways. And I was going to tell you a cock and bull story. You know the way the comedians and the politicians, when they're trying to set up a bit of a story and how they're linked to it, they say, on the way here I met. So I was going to say on the escalator somewhere between Mayo and Meath, I met a lost Bord na Móna man looking for, but I didn't. I put up and said, I'm going to rely instead on that man that's on the screen, who is my late grandfather. And he was born in 1916, and he lived, to my mind, a life less ordinary. He lost his wife at 43, she was 43 years of age, to cancer, and she left 9 young children, the youngest of which were twins, 1 year old, who are my uncle and aunt, who are 5 years older than me, because my mother was the oldest at 16 when her mother died. But he took a hands-on approach to parenting and grandparenting. He also represented the Ferban electoral area in West Offaly for 43 years of his life. A local public representative at a time when it was voluntary, at a time when there were no mobile phones, at a time when his own house had no running water. And he also spent 43 years, not the same 43 years. In 1939, he joined the Turf Development Board and spent 43 years working for it and its successor, Bord na Móna, around the bogs of Offaly and West Offaly. And his proudest time, because it was a life that had many accomplishments. He was the first citizen of Offaly for 2 council terms. He was elected or appointed or whatever they did that day in the dark rooms as Offaly Person of the Year in the early 80s. But his proudest achievement was what they achieved as largely uneducated Bord na Móna operators. Bog operators was the grandiose title they were given. But they were bog operators that took massive machinery coming in the 1940s and 50s from Russia and Germany. And they were able to adapt those machines to the unique bog-of-allen conditions that they faced on a daily basis in their boglands. These were West Offaly men, bogmen, biffos, but they were able to provide local solutions to local problems. And in some ways, I'm glad he didn't live to the realization that he was part of the decimation of Ireland's rainforest. That would have killed him if he hadn't gone before now. Because he was a man who loved nature and loved the environment. But no one told those men, and they were largely men, I'm not being sexist, that what they were doing was wrong. And I'm sure Paddy will back me when I will tell you that the ESB didn't come up with the idea of generating electricity from peat because it was a wonderful economic suggestion. The ESB discovered for many, many times that it wasn't such an economic positive move or business case. Bord na Móna was set up to create employment in a region devoid of employment, to create a use for the unreal resource that was in those Midland counties. And if I'm talking to you about communities, I'm bringing everyone with you, because it's Eddie Joe Dooley's successors that I'm talking about bringing with you, about not leaving them behind. And if I'm talking about those communities, I'm talking about communities that were marginalised and disadvantaged before Bord na Móna ever opted to go from brown to green. I'm talking about communities where third level educational attainment is 1/3 minimum of the national average. In Ireland, 33.4%, and I'm relying on the 2016 census, of our over 15-year-olds who have completed the education have third level qualifications. In areas of the peatland communities, in areas like Dangan and Kilcormac, Ferban and Edenderry, that figure is at 1/3 of that in some instances. In Ireland, 12.5% of our population have primary or no formal education. In areas in our peatland communities in 2016, that figure is 23.5% in some of those communities. In Ireland, the number of the social class, of the workforce, who are determined professional workers is on average 8.1% nationally. In Dangan, in the middle of the peatland communities, that's 1.1% professional workers in their community. 3.6% of our country's workforce was deemed unskilled in 2016. In Dangan, that's 7.6%. In Kilcormac, it's 6.6%. So we are talking about marginalised communities, disadvantaged rural areas, before just transition. These are communities that cannot be left behind. But every cloud has a single lining. And it is good to be from a community where there is, for once, a spotlight, however dim, however flickering, a spotlight being shone upon us. Because for most of my life, the Midlands have been largely ignored. And our communities of West Offaly, other than the exploits of maybe a Tony McTague or a Lowry out here in the field behind you, that's about the only time we hit the headlines. Otherwise, it's the closure of a financial institution or a power station or a Bord na Móna works. But now there is an opportunity. There is an opportunity for us, and there is a plan. And I was talking to Robert just after lunch there, talking about the collaboration that's happening from government level, from Minister Ryan's department, from the agencies around the Midlands counties, from the stakeholders. There is a genuine plan, and as well, from START, from the European Platform for Coal Regions in Transition. And I know it's coal regions, but peat is included. There is a platform, and there is a pathway towards just transition, towards enabling these people, these communities, transition to a sustainable future based on a green future. There are two elements to that. One is regional development. And that fits in with all of the policies we talked beforehand about identifying the growth sector, creating the area in a region like Athlone in the Midlands, and creating jobs. And those jobs then, and they will attract enterprise, and everyone in the region will work. There's a slight issue with that scenario. It has to be done. It's fierce important to have regional development. But it is based on the theory that a rising tide lifts all boats. And it may well do. But the individual or the community who doesn't have a boat when the tide rises is in danger of being drowned. And very often, that's the low level that the peatland communities is at. So it is equally important, and you'll be glad to know, Emer, this is the last slide. It is equally as important that there is a focus, a social inclusion focus, an active inclusion focus. And earlier, the guy from Maynooth, Connor, talked about place attachment. Actually, we should call him Courtown Connor, with place attachment. Connor talked about the sense of place, the pride of place, and the need for that. It's a sense of belonging. It's what our young people are lacking now in a global society, where you can go on and have 1,500 friends on Facebook, none of whom you've ever met. It's that sense of connection with place that is badly, badly needed. And we need to supply, in Laois and Offaly ETB, what we've done is, very simply, based around the key three strategies of the National FEST strategy around social inclusion, pathways and skills. And we have developed a strategy that looks at engaging people through green initiatives, in community action, but also in sustainable living skills for their lives. And whether it's implementing lean in the home, looking at what you can do to contribute to climate action. It's creating pathways for people to say that the skills levels and the skill sets that are required may be higher than where you're at now, particularly given the data I've just given you about our communities. But there is a pathway to those skill sets that will give you a currency in the labour market of today and tomorrow. And it's about providing skills in Ireland's critical growth areas, whether it's retrofitting, whether it's a bicycle engineering programme that we're running just because sustainable tourism has been identified as a growth sector. I'm going to finish with saying that we believe, because I'm cutting it short, because Emer is going to shortly throw something at me if I go on much longer, we believe that this approach will ensure that this is not just a transition, but it is a just transition. That it will enable all of us, even those of us living in the peatland communities, to share in the National Economic and Social Council's vision for our society, to become a resilient, sustainable, net zero carbon economy, environment and society, using innovation and collective preparedness to shape the future we all want to achieve. Gora Míle Mágaibh.
Thank you very much, Padraig, and that really brings to life the just transition that maybe is at times a grand term, but actually this bringing it down into the real world implications of it and what we need to do.